Hey guys, Chad here, and we have a great one for you today. This story comes from my little five-part anthology series. This is volume one of that, and this is the first story in that series called "The Thing on the Farm." If you like horror, you like mystery, you like thrillers, this is gonna be the one for you. A localized horror story. Check it out. Let us know what you think about it. If you'd like to get a copy of the complete book, the links are down below. Be sure you like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Chapter 1. The Hollowing. The wind spoke on the Delaney farm, its voice a drawn-out exhale of decay rather than a gentle whisper. The sound of a long-labored sigh, harsh and uneven like rotten teeth gnashing in a perpetual dust storm. Jude Delaney leaned against the warped railing of the front porch, one heavy boot resting on its splintered lip, a partly burned cigarette swaying from his lips as he watched the horizon dissolve into the deep bruises of dusk. Before him, the fields lay stretched out like withered, cracked skin, veined and fatigued with time's relentless pressure. What remained of the corn was gaunt and brittle, resembling skeletal remains more than living stalks. The cows, usual sentinels of the farmstead, had returned to their characteristic silence, their quietude often heralding an unseen malice. Jude had learned long ago to heed their subtle warnings. He spat a scornful glob into the dust and glanced at his watch. 6:37. The fading light was already speeding away. Milo, his aging mutt whose bark often betrayed less sense than force, had vanished behind the barn just before sundown, propelled by a fleeting urge to chase something unseen. Perhaps a raccoon or even a coyote had lured him off course. But now, an hour later, Milo had not returned as he always did when the frogs in the creek began their twilight chorus. Tonight, an unsettling stillness had settled over the creek. Too silent. Taking the lantern from its hook, Jude switched it on. The frail light pulsed with a tired, anxious glow as he stepped off the worn porch, past the rusted tractor and the hanging chain of broken, unused tools, and headed toward the barn. The barn had always sent a chill down his spine, ever since he was a boy. It stood at a disquieting distance from the house, nestled too deeply into a shadowed part of the trees. With every passing year, its lean grew more pronounced, as if it were secretly bowing beneath the weight of something buried far below. Its red paint had long since surrendered, peeling away in elongated, curled strips reminiscent of old scabs that refused to heal. Hesitating at its weathered threshold, Jude was first met by a jolt of unfamiliar scent, an aroma not of manure or mold, but something damp and iron-rich, disturbingly reminiscent of meat abandoned to the rain. "Milo," he called out, the name uttered more as an instinctive grunt than a hopeful plea. Only the creaking of the barn filled the silence, a slow, mournful sway that echoed memories of long nights spent wide-eyed as a child, listening to the boards groan in a language of their own. Swallowing his unease, Jude stepped inside. The beam from his lantern wavered against the walls, casting jittery shadows as dust motes danced in torpid spirals. The straw scattered across the floor had been violently disturbed, piled aside in clumps, whispering of a hasty, heavy passage. Something formidable had recently made its way through. Then came the sound. Click, click, click. It wasn't the sound of deliberate footsteps, but rather the unsettling snapping of dry, brittle joints forming, as if something was unfolding itself from a confined space, too small for its contorted form. Jude spun around abruptly, the lantern's light jerking wildly as he scanned the darkness. There was nothing but the far wall and an old, nearly forgotten trapdoor near the grain bin, a door he struggled to recall. Yet deep in his memory, he knew he had played in this space as a boy, had pried it open when he returned after his father's death the previous winter. But now, this door appeared ancient, its wood thick and burdened by time, secured with iron bands etched with strange archaic symbols, circles, crosses, and other cryptic markings cut deep into its surface. A chill crept over him, the hair on his arms standing rigid. Click. This sound now came from below, emanating from the space hidden under the tap door. Jude stepped forward, kneeling to run calloused fingers over the cold iron bolts, one of which had succumbed to rust, a testament to neglect, while another lay askew, almost as if it had been forcefully bent from within. His flashlight flickered uncertainly, and then, in that fragile moment of wavering light, he saw it. An eye. Not a full face, just one solitary glistening eye, milky and unblinking, peering up through the narrow breach in the wood. Jude recoiled violently, the movement knocking the lantern from his grasp. Its flame sputtered desperately before dying entirely. Darkness engulfed the barn. And in the suffocating blindness behind him, something scratched, once, against the door. Something was alive. Chapter 2. The Quiet Buried. Jude hadn't slept a wink. He sat hunched in the chilly kitchen, a heavy shotgun resting across his lap while a worn lantern cast a feeble glow over the scarred countertop. Outside, the wind howled and clawed at the window panes like some ravenous beast. Yet within these walls there was only oppressive silence. No television drones, no radio chatter, just the methodical tick-tock of an ancient clock mounted above the sink and an incessant, sticky drip from the old faucet that had never quite been fixed. In the recesses of his mind lingered the trap door to the barn, a grim, unwelcome reminder, like a festering scab he couldn't bear to touch yet found himself irresistibly drawn to caress. And then there was that eye, that unnerving thing. Jude repeatedly told himself it must have been a trick of the light, a mere possum or a wild stray cat. Yet the way it had fixed him, looked right through him, spoke of something otherworldly. It wasn't an animal at all. It was something else entirely. Something that seemed to know him intimately. And Milo was still missing. Lighting another cigarette, Jude's hands began trembling imperceptibly as he peered out at the foggy window into the looming silhouette of the barn, barely distinguishable in the early morning gloom. When he finally pushed himself off his seat, the sun remained hidden and only the quiet murmur of impending dawn lingered. The horizon glowed with the bruised hues of an old fight, mottled purples, ashen grays, and the faintest dying yellow, as he fumbled for the keys hanging on their hook and stepped out into the biting, saturated air. Something was off with the soil beneath his feet. Though rain had fallen only days ago, the ground should have been crusted over by now. Instead, it squelched under his heavy boots, soft and fresh, as though it had just been turned over, even though he hadn't set foot in that field in weeks. By the time he reached the barn, the first shy sunbeams crept over the distant hills, casting long, trembling shadows that seemed to shiver in silent warning as he slowly pushed open the barn doors. Everything inside remained as it had been, except for the trapdoor. Now it hung gaping and exposed. The metal hinges, which had been rusted and stubborn only the night before, lay twisted and broken nearby. Iron bolts were scattered like brittle twigs snapped in a fury. An overpowering smell struck him, an amalgam of fresh earth, bitter copper, and something ancient and sick. Instinctively, he pressed the crook of his arm over his nose and squinted into the inky darkness below. The tunnel beneath the barn delved deeper than any natural burrow might, a neat shaft cut into the earth that sloped away like a gaping throat. It was unnervingly sterile, devoid of roots or rocks, its packed walls bearing the sole scar of a singular trail of claw marks along the left side, as if something had forced its way upward, or perhaps even outwards. He didn't descend, not yet. By midday, Jude found himself in town, slouched at the counter of Maynard's Gas and Feed, sipping bitter coffee from a stained styrofoam cup. His unshaved face and dusty, overused boots spoke volumes, and the knowing glance from the cashier confirmed that she saw more than he would admit. "Back for more rat poison?" she quipped, in an attempt at humor. Jude's eyes remained distant, and no laugh followed. At a corner booth by the window sat old Widow Heller, cradling a mug as if it were the last ember of warmth in a frozen world. She watched him intently with eyes as dark as tempest skies. When he finally stirred to leave his seat, she beckoned him over in a soft, impelling gesture. He hesitated, heart-heavy, then shuffled over. "I heard your dog's gone," she stated flatly, failing to lift her eyes from the window's view. Jude nodded, voice low. "Been a day." She sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the bitterness. "The Delaney place never did like dogs." Taking a seat opposite her, Jude leaned in. "You know anything?" Widow Heller's eyes, charged with the foreboding of gathered storm clouds, met his. "My father was only a boy when your great-granddad ran that farm," she began, her tone measured. "And he swore he saw them, your kin, roaming out past midnight, 4 men encircling a fire, chanting in a tongue foreign and terrible to him. He said even the trees bowed away from the flame." Jude blinked, disbelieving. "Some ghost story?" The old woman shook her head slowly. "No," she murmured quietly. "It's a warning." A pregnant pause ensued as her voice dropped even lower. "Your family bound something down there. A pact of blood and iron, entwined with the old ways. It's neither Christian nor Cherokee, but something far older. And whatever it was, it lay dormant as long as the earth was kept fed." Jude's skin prickled. "Fed? Animals, secrets? Sometimes even more," she replied, her tone laden with foreboding. A shiver raced up Jude's spine. "You broke the chain, boy," she said ominously. "That fire's gone cold, and the thing they buried, it's hungry now." Slowly, Jude rose from the table, the sound of scraping chair legs punctuating the silence on the tiled floor. "What do I do?" he asked, voice barely audible. When at last Widow Heller looked him in the eyes, her gaze was as penetrating and grave as the storm outside. "Run." Returning to the farm, Jude found that the wind had died to an unnatural stillness. Not even a single leaf fluttered. Not one crow croaked in the eerie hush. The barn, ever present in its familiar spot, now loomed with an unsettling closeness, as if leaning forward, waiting. Stepping onto the creaking porch, Jude noticed something he hadn't seen before: fresh footprints. Milo's prints were pressed deeply into the muddy path, a clear trail leading straight up to the house. Yet interspersed among them were larger, elongated prints with too many toes and pronounced claw grooves, perfectly aligned, stride for stride. They trailed behind as if following some unseen command. Turning towards the door, his breath caught. There on the glass lay a single fresh handprint. Yet it faced in the wrong direction, a mark made from the inside. Chapter 3. The Skin Remembers. The handprint refused to fade. Jude stood at the threshold of his own home, his hand clinging to a sweating doorknob, his heart drumming furiously against ribs that felt too fragile, too empty. The mark was slick and red, not quite blood, but something close, darker, more vivid. The fingers appeared unnaturally long, and the palm seemed pressed inward, as if it had forced its way through glass instead of merely touching it. With his shotgun raised, he opened the door. The house was silent. There was no sign of a break-in, no shattered windows, nothing amiss. Everything lay just as he'd left it, and that very stillness was even more unsettling. It was as if something had slipped in and politely taken up residence. In the middle of the room, where sunlight spilled through the window onto dusty floorboards, lay Milo's collar. There was no blood, just the torn leather loop at the clasp and a few stray tufts of wiry black fur. Jude stood frozen for a long moment before closing the door behind him. The latch clicked loudly, its echoing sound giving the house an almost cavernous feel. He didn't sleep that night either. At 3:11 a.m., a sound like amplified breathing, his own, awakened him, resonating from within the walls. Gripping his shotgun tightly, he rose and kept through the dark rooms, his breath emerging as cold puffs. The house felt unnaturally cold. Every window closed, every vent silent, yet the air carried a strange heaviness, damp and thick, like the inside of a grave. He paused in the hallway before the mirror. He didn't recall leaving the bathroom light on, but there it was, a dim yellow glow trailing behind him. He turned towards it, only for the light to abruptly vanish. When he glanced back, his reflection remained eerily still. It stared at him, head tilted, eyes empty, with a smear of red tracing its mouth. Then it smiled. Jude stumbled back, and the glass cracked, thin fissures spreading from corner to corner. But when he looked again, his reflection was gone. Now it was just him and the dark. The next morning, an unyielding urge drove him to dig. A pressure behind his eyes, like a memory desperate to resurface, compelled him toward the old root cellar tunnel beneath the barn. The tunnel stretched deeper than he had ever imagined, far too deep for one man to excavate in a single night. Yet it wasn't carved by human hands. With a pickaxe in hand, Jude began chipping away at the tunnel wall. The deeper he ventured, the stranger the soil became. Damp, yet warm, with the hue of dried flesh. The earth oozed and pulsed. And then he found it. A human jawbone, still bearing molars, wrapped in decayed burlap, beneath which lay a bundle of ancient blackened iron nails, bound together with twine soaked in something dark. He recoiled, bile rising in his throat. Above him, the barn groaned. The tunnel exhaled a shifting breath, sweet and repugnant, like decay soaked in molasses. Something was down there, and it demanded that he remember. Later at the kitchen table, Jude unwrapped the burlap, trying desperately to make sense of what he had found. The nails were crooked and forged so long ago that they seemed almost otherworldly, the kind used for binding charms. He remembered his grandmother's whispered warnings during his childhood tales of keepers and wardings. He had never listened. Now, it was too late. An old photo album, untouched for years, sat on the far shelf. He opened it almost mechanically, flipping through the brittle plastic-covered pages until he came upon a single picture. His father, standing by the barn, hammer in hand with a strange symbol chalked on the door behind him. A circle enclosing a cross, bisected by what looked like a thorn branch. That was the same symbol etched into the nails. Jude stared at the image, and for the first time noticed something else, something off. In the corner of the photo near the edge of the barn wall, something lurked in shadow. Not quite a person, just the faint outline of teeth, glinting where no mouth should be. That night, he heard the voice. It was low and wet, like a throat that hadn't spoken in centuries. "You let me rot." Jude sat up in bed, heart racing, eyes scanning the darkness. "You broke the chain." The walls trembled around him. Outside, the wind was dead, the trees motionless, and yet something stirred beneath the floorboards, heavy and deliberate, dragging itself with long, careworn steps. Then came the scratching from inside the wall next to his bed. He pressed his ear to the paneling and distinctly heard his mother's voice. "We told you never to open the door, Jude." He pulled away, heart pounding, the shotgun trembling in his grasp. From the wall came one single muffled sound. Click, click, click. Chapter 4. Fire Doesn't Work. In the dim twilight, Jude's hand moved with unnerving stillness as he poured gasoline into the thirsty wood. Each measured drop seemed to carry a weight of dread, the fuel slithering in shimmering arcs across the weathered beams. The pungent aroma of gasoline mingled with the musty scent of rotting hay assaulting his nostrils even as he remained impassive and resolute. Without the slightest twitch of discomfort, he tolerated the sting of the fumes in his eyes, nor did his muscles betray him when the old barn devoured the light from his lantern, as if its gaping mouth lined with jagged, hungry edges was intent on swallowing every spark of hope. Methodically, he moved from beam to beam, splashing fuel in slow, deliberate sweeps. Each gesture was as ritualistic and solemn as that of a priest meticulously preparing for a sacred rite. Though this night's rite was no baptism of renewal, it was an elegiac farewell. When the can finally emptied its dark reservoir, he paused at the yawning edges of a shadowed tunnel, peering down into its unfathomable depths. There, the lurking presence had ceased its clandestine retreat. Earlier in the afternoon, the mysterious thing had broken its silence, not within the shifting confines of dreams or the hazy realm of hallucinations, but in the tangible world. It had scrawled its haunting message across the aging mirror in the cramped bathroom, a single anguished phrase, repeated over and over in elongated, crooked letters. "The skin remembers." In a fit of desperation, he had shattered the mirror into 1,000 jagged shards, blood oozing from his hand where the glass had left its shallow yet infuriating mark. The wound, though seemingly trivial, had festered with an unholy speed, its relentless throb echoing in time with a hidden heartbeat he swore he could sense beneath the creaking floorboards. There was no retreat, no possibility of turning back. With a steady hand, Jude struck a match. Its brief incandescent flare burned with an almost otherworldly heat that danced at his fingertips, igniting a spark of doubt for a suspended second. A flicker of memory. His father's calloused, unyielding hands, his mother's soft yet insistent warnings, the lingering aroma of bitter black coffee that once permeated the old kitchen. But these vestiges of a bygone life were swallowed up, devoured by the dark maw of the present. With conviction hardened like cooled metal, he dropped the match into the waiting fuel. The flame took hold instantly, raging along the soaked planks like a serpentine inferno, its tendrils twisting in furious orange arcs. The barn itself seemed to howl in agony as the fire devoured the rafters, and ghostly coils of smoke slithered through the broken slats, echoing the sorrow of lost souls. Jude stepped back, his eyes wide with a mix of terror and reluctant awe as he watched the conflagration dance. Then, amidst the crackling chaos, a sound erupted. It was not a human scream, but rather the anguished cry of something that had once known humanity. The sound came from below, from the depths of the tunnel and the very earth itself. A strange, layered wail, simultaneously high and deep, like an otherworldly choir of dying creatures dragging out a singular note of anger and despair. In a surreal instant, the ravenous fire died. Every flame was snuffed out in a blink, leaving behind no lingering smoke, no trace of ash, and no charred ruin. The barn, impossibly, stood whole and unblemished. Jude staggered back, his vision swimming as he muttered in disbelief, No, I saw it catch. I saw it burn. Yet before him, the beams were unscathed, the gasoline entirely vanquished, and the matchstick had vanished as if it were nothing more than a figment of a fevered dream. Then, from the mouth of the tunnel came a slow, measured clicking, a sound deliberate and foreboding, as if a colossal being was crawling back into the light, dragging itself from the abyss. Panic seized him, and without permission from his own limbs, he ran. When he finally returned to the house, an eerie disquiet whispered through its silence. Something was deeply amiss. The atmosphere was unnaturally still. Every surface was immaculately clean, polished to a mirror-like shine, as though the home had been transposed into a sterile showroom replica. Yet it was not his home, not truly. The calendar on the wall stubbornly read 1974, distorting the flow of time, and in a framed photograph he saw a younger version of himself, barely 6 years old, nestled on his father's knee. But as he gazed at the image, unease prickled his skin. He didn't recall ever wearing that shirt, couldn't remember that smile, or the peculiar scar etched along his father's jaw. Compelled by an inexplicable force, he stepped toward the portrait. In that disquieting moment, the image shifted. The face in the photo flickered, morphing into his own features, then his father's, blurring the lines between memory and illusion. For an agonizing heartbeat, both faces merged into one, sharing the same inexplicable grin and those haunting, wide, milky white eyes. Horrified, Jude recoiled at the revelation as a disembodied voice whispered, "You were meant to stay here," emanating from the depths of the kitchen. Clutching his shotgun, he advanced cautiously into the silent room. There, nothing stirred, except for a solitary chair that rocked slowly at the dining table, the very chair his father once occupied. The chair groaned a low, lamenting sound as it swayed rhythmically, as if moved by an unseen force. On the table lay an unsettling new arrangement, a meticulously stacked pile of bones arranged with deliberate precision. They were far too long to belong to any ordinary animal and too distorted to be wholly human. At the very center, an eerie spectacle awaited, a heart that still beat, its rhythmic thump echoing in the oppressive silence. Thump, thump, thump. Overwhelmed by dread, Jude backed away from the house until he nearly slipped off the worn porch. The barn doors, which had closed hours before, now swung wide open once again, beckoning him to a fate too horrible to conceive. And waiting in the mouth of the tunnel was that very presence, persistent and inexplicable. He recalled little of the journey onward, as if his legs had carried him without his volition, descending a gentle slope into an otherworldly realm. One moment he was in the familiar yard, the next his boots pressed into soft, moist earth, and the air around him became suffused with a stifling warmth and humidity, reminiscent of the interior of a living lung. The tunnel stretched deeper into the earth, its walls growing broader and increasingly marked by savage claw scratches, each gouge vast enough to cradle a fallen body. At the bottom of this descent lay an expansive chamber where nature itself seemed to reclaim the space. Tangled roots snaked through the ceiling like ancient veins, and the very earth pulsed with life, shifting with hues of red and pink. Bone fragments jutted from the walls like macabre ornaments, and the faded visages of half-buried faces peered out hauntingly. some with hollow, empty sockets and others with eyes that betrayed a lingering spark of life. Dominating the center of this subterranean crypt was the Thing. It crouched low, yet even in its hunched posture it exuded an imposing presence. Its body was a grotesque mosaic, stitched together from disjointed patches that defied natural order. Wisps of skin hung in uneven, fleshy strips, like tattered curtains around its torso, and along its spine sprouted spindly, elongated appendages that might be arms, legs, or something disturbingly in between. But nothing seized his attention more than the face. It bore a face disturbingly familiar. It was his father's, yet rendered in youth, smiling with a disquieting warmth that chilled Jude's very soul. "Son," it rasped in a voice layered with decay and longing. Desperation stealing his voice, Jude raised the shotgun. "I'm ending this," he declared in a low, resonant tone. The Thing tilted its head, its eerie smile spreading wider as it countered. "No, you're finishing it." With that, it slowly pushed itself upright. The shotgun roared, discharging once, then twice. The force sent splinters of wood and dark, viscous ichor flying from its shoulder, each chunk clattering against the stone walls. Yet the abomination did not falter. It laughed, a sound that twisted and echoed off the cavernous walls. Then, in a shifting of voices that sent shivers down Jude's spine, the creature spoke again, in his mother's gentle, lulling tone, as though trying to seduce him back to a forsaken past. "You were born on this land. You belong to it, just like me, just like him." It extended its arms as if embracing the world, and the very roots of the chamber pulsed beneath the weight of its presence. Simultaneously, the bones embedded in the walls began to stir, creaking as they moved, setting in motion a nightmarish rehearsal of the past merging with the present. Chapter 5. The Earth Remembers. The bones stirred in the dim gloom, first in the faintest of twitches, then erupting in violent bursts as half-formed, tormented bodies pushed free from the cold, damp walls. Their jaws clattered like brittle bones, limbs twisted into unnatural angles, and mouths stretched wide in silent, agonized screams. Jude recognized the faces, grim visages of cousins long vanished, neighbors consigned to forgotten graves, and even the familiar smile of a girl with neatly plaited braids captured in a second-grade photograph. But all were disturbingly wrong, each an eerie piece of a dark, overarching tapestry. From the encroaching shadows, the Thing advanced. It dragged behind itself a writhing cord of roots, hanging like a tattered cloak. Its torso swelled with each labored breath, exhaling a dank odor of ancient graves and lost histories. Behind its macabre stitched face, countless other faces pressed in, a desperate throng fighting for a glimmer of light. Some unmistakably human, others grotesquely aberrant. In a voice that cracked like splintering old timber, it intoned, "You are the last Delaney. You are the final lock." Jude stumbled backward toward the yawning entrance of the tunnel, his heart pounding in his ears. His shotgun, a fragile bulwark of hope, was empty. It slipped from his grasp onto the cold ground. As he turned in a panic to run, the very dirt beneath him came alive, rising like viscous liquid earth to engulf him. It pulled him downward into the chamber floor, where hundreds of pale, gaunt hands emerged from the loamy soil. Some hands were childlike, others bore the marks of an ancient age, yet all gripped him with icy, inescapable certainty. Drawing ever closer, the Thing spoke again, its voice a low murmur, interwoven with ominous truths. "The Earth doesn't forget. The blood remembers. With deliberate dread, it placed one massive, sinewy hand upon Jude's chest, and in that moment, the floodgates of memory burst open. He saw himself as a small, trembling boy hidden beneath a sturdy table while his father and grandfather leaned in close, whispering over clinking glasses of whiskey. Their voices uttered arcane words like warding, binding, rot, and sacrifice, while his great-grandfather carved eerie symbols into a pig's skull with deliberate precision. He recalled his mother, tears glistening in the night, furtively burying something in a tiny worn shoebox in the garden, and the barn standing proud and new, each beam driven home with cold iron nails. Above it all flowed an unending torrent of blood, a memory as vivid as it was horrifying, and always haunting him, the dark tunnel and the unfathomable presence lurking beneath. In a voice rich with bitter revelation, the thing whispered, "You knew. You always knew." Jude gasped, his voice trembling in denial. "No, I didn't. I never," before the creature cut him off with a chilling rebuke. "You buried me with your silence." Then, defying all expectations of metaphor, it opened its chest. The stitched hide peeled back like a tattered curtain to reveal an altar of black stone, starkly veined with luminous gold and pulsing with a rhythm that belonged to no living heart. Hovering above this unholy relic was a small, terrible object, a seed, not a mere tooth, but a dark, twisting, and ravenously hungry kernel of something ancient and unspeakable. "You will carry it," the thing decreed, its tone resonating with prophetic finality. "And the farm will live again." Jude screamed, a raw sound that merged with the chamber's escalating roar. Amid the swirling madness, over the soundless hum of the earth itself, a softer, familiar voice reached him, his mother's tender whisper, "You don't have to be him." With trembling hands, Jude reached into his pocket and withdrew a bundle wrapped in worn burlap. Within lay the binding nails he'd scavenged from a shattered jawbone, each one etched with a warding symbol of old. Summoning a fierce resolve, he lunged forward, driving all 3 nails into the pulsing heart of the altar. In that instant, a conflagration of light erupted. Not a heavenly gold, but a savage, blinding white that seared the chamber with uncompromising purity. The thing unleashed a howl that broke into hundreds of voices, each shrieking in a forgotten language, so old that words themselves had been eroded from memory. The walls buckled and collapsed. The risen bones tumbled in chaotic disarray. The thing disintegrated into a maelstrom of twisting roots and smoldering ash, as if consuming itself with a brutal internal fire. And at last, the ancient earth fell silent, as though an age-long curse had been lifted. Jude awoke at dawn in an empty field, where the familiar outlines of the barn and house were no more. Only flat, cracked, and parched dirt stretched out before him under a silent, peaceful horizon. He rose slowly, his hands raw and his shirt scarred by burn marks, and above him, solitary birds wheeled in the clear sky, while an uncharacteristic stillness muted in the wind. In the distance, a truck rumbled to a stop. Sheriff Harlan emerged, his face etched with confusion as he called out, "What the hell happened out here?" Jude remained silent, staring instead at his palm where the binding nails had once been embedded. In their place bloomed 3 perfect scars, veined intricately, dark as obsidian and pulsating with a strange, enduring rhythm. A faint smile crossed his face, reminiscent of the one his father used to wear. Epilogue. In the years that followed, new homes arose on the old Delaney land, grand, well-crafted model houses built for hopeful young families. Yet one curious presence remained unchanged, a towering tree growing behind Lot 6, its gnarled form and long black roots a stark anomaly amid modernity. It had simply appeared one morning unbidden and mysterious. Every spring it shed seeds the size and the shape of teeth, and those who passed by sometimes swore that beneath it the very ground exhaled a slow, deliberate breath, as if guarding silent secrets of the past.